Israel's ultimate bestie. That's how Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sees US President Donald Trump. But is the feeling still mutual? From secret negotiations with Hamas and Iran to cutting Israel out of a surprise deal with the Houthis, the US hasn't exactly been acting like a BFF. Today we ask, are US priorities pivoting away from Israel? You're watching Counterpoints with me, Melinda Nusafora. Benjamin Netanyahu was the first foreign leader invited to visit US President Trump when he returned to the Oval Office. But that house call isn't being reciprocated. Israel didn't make the cut for Trump's highly anticipated Middle East tour. It doesn't matter how many times Netanyahu says this.
President Trump is the greatest friend that Israel has ever had in the White House. And the visit in Washington reflected that in every way.
Actions speak louder than words, and the US has been making pivotal diplomatic moves without taking Israel into account. For example, during his visit to Saudi Arabia, Trump relaxed the timeline for normalization with Israel as a precondition of broader economic agreements. Indeed, the transactional nature of the president's Middle East tour points to a major diplomatic shift. If you've got something to offer Trump, he's ready to do business, and that could turn regional alliances on their head. The big question then is what all this could mean for Gaza. If America is entering a new phase of Middle East relations, could that weaken Israel's hand? And could it strengthen the push for negotiations and a firm day-after plan? On this episode of Counterpoints, we'll debate, is the US now sidelining Israel on key negotiations? Whether US recognition of Palestine is potentially on the cards? And what does this all ultimately mean for the conflict in Gaza? Before we get into today's debate, we've got some special interviews to bring you. A little earlier, I spoke with Ami Ayalon about Israel's relationship with the US. Ami has spent nearly 40 years working as a public servant for the State of Israel. He was the former Commander-in-Chief of Israel's Navy and also served as the head of the country's domestic secret service, Shin. Here's part of our interview. Mr. Ayalon, thank you for talking to Counterpoints. You and your former Security Service colleagues wrote an open letter to US President Donald Trump on March 11, saying that the Gaza war no longer serves Israel's national objectives. Can you explain your position and why you and your colleagues felt so compelled to write what was a very impassioned letter?
Well, first of all, the immediate reason was the hostages. We still have hostages in somewhere in the tunnels, and they are dying every day. And I think that for us Israelis, we believe that the old concept, we rely on each other. So we cannot define the essence of victory unless we should bring them back. But in addition, when we try to understand the whole idea of this war, it started after the 7th of October in 23. It was a just war. It was a war of defense, and we reacted against horror and violence used by Hamas. But after between 6 to 8 months, the way we understand the battlefield, we achieved all the military goals. The problem with this war is that from the very beginning, our leaders, our political leaders, did not define any political goal to this war. Now, after almost 40 years of experience, and I'm studying, the concept of war until today, I know exactly what happens to a war that we launch without any political goal. The war becomes the end and not the mean in order to achieve a better reality. And this is exactly what we see. We are conquering several places for the fourth time. We are destroying, we are killing innocent people. And, you can explain something only if you understand what we are wishing. What is the day after? Now, other governments, this government, do not define the day after. And since they do not define the day after, we have to stop this war.
You said that when it started, it was a just war. Does that mean you no longer think it is a just war? And where, for you, was that turning point?
The turning point, first of all, I said from the first day that to go to war without a clear definition of the political goal is a huge mistake. But as all of us understood, it was a war of defense. It was a reaction against the horror and the violence that we never could understand until today. But the way we understand this war, it took us several months. Some people will tell you 8 months, some people will tell you 12 months. But we are fighting for the last 18, 19 months. We achieved all the military goals, which is to destroy the military capability of Hamas. Hamas are not acting as a military unit. They are acting because they are terrorists. But there is no way to eliminate all Hamas activists. We have to understand what we are facing is a very, very violent ideology.
So do you believe then that effectively...
we shall kill, sorry?
Do you believe effectively then that Hamas has been defeated in Gaza?
From the military point of view, yes, we can measure it. And they do not act as an organization. They control the area because we did not create somebody, or we did not do anything in order to create somebody to replace it. And everything starts because there is no definition to the day after. And there is no definition to the day after because the Israeli society is divided. Because in order to decide on the day after, some people in this government will tell you, unless we shall occupy Gaza and we shall build settlements in Gaza, we do not have the right to end this war. The majority of the Israelis do not agree. The majority of the Israelis, between 70 to 80% of the Israelis, are telling to our government every day we have to bring back all our hostages and to end this war.
You mentioned there the day after. There was no plan for the day after. You are a career military man. You've worked under 3 different prime ministers, I believe. Have you ever worked under a commander-in-chief, so to speak, who went into a conflict without a day after plan? Yes,
unfortunately, it happened exactly during the first Intifada and the second Intifada. Many people in Israel will tell you that we are still fighting the 6-day war. And it's very complicated. I don't think that in 5-10 minutes I will be able to explain to the audience the idea that most, we as admirals, commanders, whatever, we used to think, by the way, it's a huge mistake, that the political leaders should define the day after, and it is not our problem. Our problem is how to operate and know why are we doing it. We used to think that we have to rely on our leaders. This is the first time when we understand, or at least we believe, that the reasons of our political leaders do not serve the future of the state of Israel and do not serve the future of the people of Israel. Because they do not tell us. What is the day after? The day after is a reason why we are ready to fight, why we are killing, and why many of us are ready to die.
Do you think that there are many current Israeli soldiers who share your sentiment, that they feel like they're fighting a war that now doesn't need to be fought, and that perhaps this is an aimless and deadly obsession?
Look, I served too many years to think that this is the reality. Unfortunately, I think, and I know it happened to me when I was in the military service for many years. I think that for a soldier, it is almost impossible to think that his leaders do not think on why they are sending him to war. He cannot believe that his leaders are doing it for political reasons. I think that you can understand it only when you see it from outside. I'm 80 years old. I think that I'm old enough to understand. I've been in politics. I saw politicians. It happened not only in Israel. I think that politicians sometimes are sacrificing the future of the state in order to make sure that they will stay in power.
Do you think then that there are going to be some very disappointed and very disillusioned soldiers when they do come out of this and they do get some perspective?
I think that, yes, I think that most Israelis understand that when this war will end, only then we shall be able to see clearly what happened to us since the beginning of the war, of this war, what happened to us as human beings, and what happened to us as the Israeli society. And are we closer to a better reality or are we not? It's too early.
Are you disappointed that US President Donald Trump isn't visiting Israel on his current tour of the Middle East? Does it give you and perhaps the Israeli community the impression that he's more interested in making headline deals than he is in ending the war?
Look, I used to say that, you know, psychology department belongs to my wife and not to me and our family. But still, I'm not in a position to judge the American president. I believe I did not elect him. I have no right to vote in America. I am only an Israeli citizen. The way I understand him, he is doing what he thinks is good for the American interest. And I quite understand whether I like it as an Israeli or no, it's not the question. As an American president, he believes that he should achieve stability in this region. I think that the only way to do it is to fly to Saudi Arabia and to try to persuade Saudis to go forward and to try to achieve a nuclear deal with Iran instead of going into a new war. And this is the way he understands the reality. This is the way he understands the Middle East. And I don't think that he's wrong.
Do you think, though, how is it being portrayed domestically in Israel, though? There was this big hope that after the difficulties, perhaps, that Netanyahu faced under the presidency of Joe Biden, that Donald Trump returning to the White House gave the Israeli community the feeling that the full support of the US would be returning militarily, diplomatically. Domestically, are people still feeling that way? Or is there a sense that they're feeling abandoned?
Again, Israel is a divided society. And I think that most people from outside, when they see us, they do not understand the rifts between the Israeli tribes. Many Israelis were very happy when Trump was elected because they used to believe that from now on, you know, we will be able to do everything and nobody will limit us and he will support us, whatever we should do. I didn't think so. And I think I even wrote several articles about it, explaining that finally, the way I understand the American president, if I have to predict, he will adopt the vision of Biden, but he will use another ideas in order to execute it. And if you ask me, this is the way I understand what he's doing now. The problem is that our leaders do not understand it and are not playing part. They are out of the game. So when he will go, he came to the, it's the first, after Obama, he's the only president, even before Obama, who came to the Middle East and did not visit Israel as part of his visit. So I think that the Israeli government made almost every mistake, and we are isolated, not only in the world, but in the Middle East as well. It's not too late to change this course of action, and I want to believe that with the pressure from the international community, and especially if we shall understand, if the Saudis and the Egyptians and the Jordanians and the American president will tell us loud and clear, this is the future that all of us offer, a coalition or a coalition that will bring, a regional coalition that will bring Saudis, Egyptians, all the stable states of this region, and we shall create the economy. We shall create we shall ensure our border, etc. It's a totally different future. I think that the Israeli society will have to listen, and this is a democracy. Finally, this coalition will not survive forever.
You know, we'll always bring you all sides of the story here on Counterpoints, so we also spoke to Hamas about the current situation. Basem Naim is a senior political official within the organisation and joined me a little earlier. You mentioned President Trump there. He's just spoken recently in Qatar on his Middle East tour and suggested the US could take Gaza, he said, and turn it into what he has described as a freedom zone. What does Hamas make of those comments and that suggestion?
To be honest, it is very strange. We were in direct contact with the American administration, sometimes through the mediators and sometimes directly, and we have told all the mediators clearly that our main goal is how to stop this aggression and how to allow aid to come into Gaza and to give this a push and to succeed and to help paving the way for a successful visit in the area, in the region. We have made this gesture to the President Trump by releasing the Israeli-American soldier Alexander Idan. Within these talks and negotiations, there was a clear understanding between us and the Americans that when we do this, President Trump, he will thank Hamas for this, but what is most important, he will, on the second day, oblige Israel to allow aid to come into Gaza, and he will call for an immediate ceasefire talks with the goal to end this war, including the prisoner exchange. Unfortunately, he was not able to exercise enough pressure on the Israelis, neither to allow aid to come into Gaza, nor to call for a clear and well-defined negotiations to end this ceasefire based on our approach, which is a comprehensive approach, which means we are ready to hand over all the Israeli soldiers in our hands, and in return we will get back some of our prisoners. But the main goal is how to end the war, how to get a total withdrawal of the Israeli forces outside the Gaza Strip, and to rebuild Gaza again. And by the way, we have talked about opening a political horizon or a political pave a way for a political solution for the Palestinian Israeli conflict. Unfortunately, despite of all these good intentions from our side, despite of all the efforts from the mediators to give again a push to a successful visit, what we got, what we are seeing now on the ground, what we are observing now on the ground, heavy air strikes, more tightening the siege, and statements from President Trump talking about taking over Gaza. Gaza is belonging to the Palestinian like any Palestinian territory, and Gazans are the exclusive party who have the right to decide what to do with Gaza, what is the future of Gaza, who have the right to run Gaza, what about Hamas, and therefore we have called many times, instead of this, go for free and transparent elections and allow the Palestinians everywhere in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank and East Jerusalem to decide for themselves, to choose their way and to choose their leadership. Mm-hmm. No one has the right to impose any solution or any future or any leadership on the Palestinians, neither in Gaza nor elsewhere in the West Bank or anywhere where Palestinians are existing.
I want to come back to negotiations in just a minute and also to elections and who gets to choose what role Hamas plays. But I just want to pick up on one thing you mentioned there about direct talks. Is that confirmation that Hamas has been and continues to be in direct talks with the US administration, perhaps including Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff?
Yes and no. We were in some stations in direct talks with the American administrations, and we have met with some representative of the American administrations. One of the well-known cases was Adam Boehler and his team. And in some cases, we have talked to the American administration through the mediators, mainly the Qataris.
So yes, there has been direct talks
with the American administration, but yes, there was direct talks with the American administration. Again, Adam Boehler was one of the cases, but there are other stations or cases where we also were in direct talks with the Americans.
And do you expect those direct talks to continue? Do you think they've been more productive than when Israel has been involved in the negotiations?
Look, our enemy is only one. It is the Israeli occupation. And we have heard a lot about the vision and the intentions of President Trump to de-escalate the situation in a lot of areas around the world. He is doing this in Ukraine, he is doing this in Yemen, he is doing this by adopting negotiations with Iran instead of going towards war based on the wishes of Netanyahu. He is trying to do this, or he did it between India and Pakistan. I think this has encouraged us to build on this and to make this good gesture to President Trump and to call him to do the same thing in our case, first to de-escalate the situation by ending this war immediately and allowing aid to go into Gaza, and then to call for opening a political path or a political way for a political solution of this conflict. We believe that President Trump can do it. He say repeatedly he is committed to peace. He is looking for a peaceful region, and we have said it many times. There will be no peaceful or stable or prosperous region without solving the Palestinian question. And in the core of this, and which is urgent, is to stop the war on Gaza and to end this genocide and to give the Palestinians in Gaza Strip to rebuild their life again by the aid and the support of all people around the world, including the Americans. Therefore, we believe that he can do it. If he wants, he can exercise enough pressure in Netanyahu, and he has all the tools to do it. He did it in different areas, as I mentioned.
Do you think that, as far as Hamas is concerned, the Trump administration has been more effective to deal with than his predecessor, President Joe Biden?
Look, we believe that the strategic alliance between Israel and the Americans is an unwavering relationship, or is a strong commitment, and it is not easy to separate these two both sides. But at least we believe if President Trump and his team are looking for a more peaceful and prosperous region and in different areas around the world, I think they have to put their hand here in this conflict and to exercise enough pressure on the Israeli and the Israeli government, and to put an end of this humanitarian disaster and genocide. Maybe President Trump is more clear about his intentions. And
I was just going to ask, do you feel that the US is potentially frustrated with the US administration, as has been widely reported? Sorry, I beg your pardon. Do you think that President Trump has been frustrated with the Israeli administration, as has been widely reported, that there is frustration that Prime Minister Netanyahu isn't moving quickly enough on negotiations? Do you think that will allow the US to put more pressure on Israel?
Again, if they have this vision to have a peaceful and prosperous region, they have to solve this question. Without solving this question, the Palestinian question, there will be no prosperous or peaceful or stable region. We believe that President Trump is looking for this and working hard to achieve this goal, but at the same time, we believe that he is surrounded by a lot of politicians, consultants, employees who are strongly committed to the Israeli vision and to the Israeli narrative and to the Israeli project. And therefore, we have seen this up and down policies or statements. Therefore, we believe, yes, if there is a clear, if he is upset with Netanyahu, this will help us to move a little bit forward, but without being strict and committed to solve this question, and to be sure that without solving this conflict in the region, all other steps to de-escalate the situation in Yemen, in Syria, in Lebanon, with Iran, it will be useless, or the outcome will be very, very minimal to reach the main goal of, again, a peaceful and prosperous region.
There are reports that say Prime Minister Netanyahu has set today, Thursday the 15th, as the deadline to reach a deal. If nothing is agreed to, he intends to launch his expanded operation. Is this make or break day for the future of Gaza?
First of all, Netanyahu and his radical extremist racist government, they were in Gaza for 17 months, and they have besieged and attacked Gaza for 17 months by all the capabilities they have, supported by the international community, especially the Western countries, in particular the United States, by all means, politically, diplomatically, weapons, financially, and so on and so on. And he has failed. He has failed along 17 months to crush the resistance, to retrieve his captured Israeli soldiers because of military pressure, and to forceful evacuation or expulsion of Palestinians. He failed. Therefore, he can do it again, but he will fail again, because as I said, what he failed at the beginning, he will not be. It will not be successful with divided Israeli political situation at the level of the army, at the level of the politicians, at the level of the society. He will not be able to do it, while the international community day after day is exercising more pressure legally and in the media. We hear yesterday in the Security Council, we have heard all the countries, including the allies of Israel, blaming Israel and exercising pressure on Israel that this has to end. The war on Gaza has to end, and the humanitarian disaster has to end, and Israel, as an occupying power, is obliged to allow aid to go into Gaza. Therefore, with all these conditions, I think the chance to succeed will be much less than before. He might be able to kill more Palestinians. He might be able to succeed to destroy more houses, more clinics, more water wells, but he will fail. And from our side, as a resistance, if we have only one of two choices, to be killed, I mean Palestinians in general, including the resistance today, by Israeli airstrikes in a new operation, or to be killed tomorrow after giving up all the hostages, and as he declared 2 days ago, he will continue the war. If these are the choices, we are not ready. There is no rationality to go for such a deal, to give up all the captured Israelis and to wait for new airstrikes or new military operations, again to kill more Palestinians and to destroy more houses.
If you had to name the main obstacle in these negotiations, what would you say it is? What is the number one hurdle that neither side can get a deal on?
Netanyahu.
But in what regard? Break it down to what the element is.
The main obstacle is that we are insisting on ending the war. We are not ready to be engaged in any negotiations or any deal which is not leading to end the war. Allowing aid to come into Gaza, this is not a negotiation issue, because this is an obligation of Israel and is an occupying power, and this is a genuine right, a fundamental right of Palestinians inside the Gaza Strip. This has not to be negotiated at all. But the main block, the main obstacle is we are calling for ending the war, and Netanyahu is calling for getting back the Israeli soldiers, the prisoners in the hands of the resistance, and he is declaring to continue the war again.
And you can find the full version of both of those interviews on our Arabiya English YouTube channel if you want to hear more. But for now, let's get straight into our debate and welcome today's panellists. I'm joined by Avi Meir, the founder of Jerusalem Journal and the former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. And Ahmed Eldon is back with us, host of the newly launched Out Loud podcast and a journalist who writes on Substack. Gentlemen, thanks for being here on Counterpoints. The US has always said its support for Israel is ironclad. But is that ironcladding maybe starting to look a little rusty, maybe even corroding around the edges a little bit? There are reports that the Trump administration is becoming increasingly frustrated with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Although it's unlikely that the US is going to abandon its ally altogether, it does appear to be changing the way it prioritises its regional relationships. Avi, let me ask you, is the Trump administration sidelining Israel?
Well, Melinda, I don't think that the Trump administration is sidelining Israel. I do think that there are certain differences of opinion between the administration and the Netanyahu government, as is natural in any relationship. And we, of course, saw that he has chosen to visit the region and yet not make a stop in Israel, which I think raised some eyebrows, not only in Jerusalem, but around the world. But the president has reiterated his support for Israel's right to defend itself. He did so just today, saying that what happened on October 7th was abhorrent. And of course, Israel does have the right to defend its citizens. I think that that is an ironclad commitment that every president will continue to maintain no matter what administration. I'm very hopeful that will continue.
Ahmed, what do you think? Avi says, obviously, it has raised some eyebrows. Is it making people question whether support for Israel is as ironclad as they thought, or is there going to be more pressure on the Israeli government to start negotiating with the Palestinian cause?
Well, Melinda, I think both those things can be true. I mean, the so-called rift between the US and Israel under Trump seems to me like political theater, a distraction. I mean, while some in the West dissect the optics, Netanyahu's continuing his war of annihilation. He's using US weapons and US cover. And let's not forget, Trump long ago moved the US embassy to Jerusalem, cut off UNRWA funding, and legitimized settlements, even though we know, of course, they're illegal under international law. So let's be clear. I mean, Trump's not interested in justice, only loyalty optics. And I think Netanyahu knows it. He even said recently that Israel, I think it was today, may soon wean itself off US military aid. I don't think that's because Israel, wants to be independent. It's because the US has given them everything, including political blank checks. And that's why I think what's more interesting to me is that 550 former Israeli intelligence and security officials have warned that Netanyahu's warpath is detrimental to Israel too. I mean, they're calling for Trump not to listen to Netanyahu, to end the killings, to reject annexation, to secure the hostages. And that's not coming from radicals. I mean, that's coming from the Israeli security establishment.
Avi, what do you make of that open letter that was directed to President Trump? It was pretty scathing.
Well, I think this may be one point in which Ahmed and I agree. I think that there is a huge sentiment in Israel pushing for some kind of a deal. There is a great deal of support in Israel for the return of the hostages as swiftly as possible. And it is clear that there are certain obstacles in the way. Now, what we understand from former U.S. officials and, of course, others who've been involved is that Hamas has been the primary obstacle to the establishment of any kind of ceasefire. As recently as today, there have been discussions in Doha, and Hamas appears to be rejecting the Witkoff plan, which has been put forward to have some kind of a gradual ceasefire. And that, of course, is tremendously unfortunate, first and foremost, for the people of Gaza who continue to suffer in this war that was launched and is perpetuated by Hamas, which is holding them as a massive human shield, but of course for all people in the region and of course the hostages as well. So I think there is indeed great deal of support in Israel for some kind of a ceasefire. I think that letter was reflective of that. I'm very hopeful that that will move forward at some point in the near future.
Ahmed, what do you make of that characterisation, that it's Hamas that has been the major obstacle to a ceasefire and a hostage deal negotiation?
I mean, I'm not surprised that Avi is saying this. He says this often on X. He's one of those that somehow defies logic and rationale to always blame everything entirely on Hamas, even when Israel kills children, for example.
Ahmed, would there be a war were it not for October 7th? It's very simple. Would there be a war were it not for the massacre of October 7th? Yes or no?
I would like to continue answering Melinda's question because I think it's laughable.
But you say that I'm the usual suspect.
After 700 days of genocide, you're asking me about October 7th and hypotheticals.
I contend that Hamas is responsible for this war, which it launched with the massacre of October 7th. Yes or no?
Is Hamas responsible for Israel murdering a 12-year-old boy yesterday? Is Hamas responsible for Israel bombing all the hospitals in Gaza? Avi, if you're going to speak over me, I'm not going to participate.
All right, so I'll ask. Let's just reiterate.
Melinda, you asked me a question and I couldn't answer it because he interrupted me with, what about Hamas on October 7th?
Okay, well, I mean, it is a legitimate question.
You were being asked about and you refused to answer it. So let me ask again.
Okay, I'll answer that question. Can I answer that question about...
Yes or no?
Go ahead, Ahmed. Answer that question.
Israel's objective is not just to eliminate Hamas, as they say. That is a slogan that is used to justify the unjustifiable. The real objective, as we've seen day in, day out, Avi, is the erasure of Palestinian life, identity, and resistance.
Ahmed, would there not be a war?
Can I finish my sentence?
Terrible suffering is being endured in Gaza were it not for October 7th and for Hamas's insistence on perpetuating that war to this very day. Yes or no, would there be a war were it not for the massacre of October 7th and Hamas's calculated decision to keep that war going to this very day?
Yes, there would be a war. That's my opinion, and I'm about to explain why.
Okay, let Ahmed finish.
Avi, Israel bombed two hospitals.
I'd like to hear you You have to wring your way out of this.
I know you want me to talk about Hamas and how they're responsible for everything, but I'm using
absolutely like that. Yes, that is correct.
I'm using facts to describe what Israel is responsible for, not just since October 7th, but for decades in Gaza and occupied Palestine. Israel bombed 2 hospitals.
How far back would you like to go? Would you like to go as far back as 1929, when Jews were massacred?
Avi, can I speak
okay.
afraid of the fact?
State of Israel existed?
Melinda, it seems to me like Avi is very afraid
Avi,
of
just pause
facts.
for a second, Avi. Let Ahmed answer that question, and then I'm going to move on to our next topic. So, Ahmed, just finish explaining your answer to Avi's question, and then I'm going to move on.
Avi, why I don't think that Hamas is responsible for the almost 100,000 Palestinians that Israel has killed. Like the 12-year-old boy named Mohammed Bardawli, who was supposed to testify about Israel's execution of 15 paramedics in Gaza. He had already spoken with the New York Times and was due to speak again with the child psychologist present. Instead, Israel killed a 12-year-old child witness. What we're witnessing is a slow, brutal erasure of Gaza's healthcare system. You want to blame that on Hamas?
You're trying to divert attention from the true facts here. Were it not for Hamas, there would be no war. There would be no war.
Avi, what was happening on October 7th, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago? Was there no war?
Instead of looking at the past, because unfortunately October 7 did happen, and we're a long way past that now with still no sign of how to get out of this. So, Avi, let me put this to you. According to Israeli media, Donald Trump's special envoy told hostage families recently that the US doesn't agree with Israel's approach currently to the conflict and believes that the next step should be a ceasefire and hostage release deal. Do you think that's an accurate assessment? And do you think that that shows a rift between Israel and the US establishment?
I mean, that particular statement at the end, I don't think represents a rift at all. I think everyone's on the same page that what will end up happening will be a ceasefire involving the release of hostages. The Israeli government believes so as well. It's a matter of what that plan looks like, what the pacing is, and so on and so forth. The special envoy also said yesterday to the hostages that were not for the Netanyahu government. Idan Alexander, the Israeli-American hostage released this week, would not have been released. So I think that one could read these statements in various different ways, but I think that there is general agreement that the only way this war can end is with the release of those hostages, and that, again, is wholly in the hands of Hamas. Hamas has held on to these hostages since day one. They could have released them on day one, and that would have been the end of the war. And yet they have chosen not to. They've chosen to hold the entire people of Gaza hostage along with the Israelis in order to further their aim of, raining terror and destruction on the entire region. They have said time and again that given the opportunity, they would carry out more and more October 7th massacres until Israel is eradicated. That is Hamas's agenda. They're very clear about it, and they have not strayed from that from day one.
And yet, I just want to push you on one thing, Avi. The idea then that the Netanyahu government is now expanding its war effort, it's saying this war won't end, they aren't indicating that they're at all interested in a ceasefire deal.
Well, previous experience has shown that military pressure has, in the past, helped ease Hamas's way to some kind of a deal. Now, I have to say, there are many Israelis who do not feel that the war should be expanded at this time, that the hostages could thus be endangered, and that there could be any number of other ramifications. That is a very vivid debate within Israeli society. But it is certainly true that there is, I think, pretty broad agreement. At the end of the day, there will have to be a ceasefire and release of hostages. I hope, as do many Israelis, I'm sure Palestinians as well, that that happens as soon as possible.
Ahmed, what do you think about this comment from Trump's special envoy saying that he doesn't agree with Israel's stated next steps, this expanded conflict, and that the next step should be a ceasefire deal? Do you think that the US should be doing more than just saying it doesn't agree? It's kind of easy to say.
Yeah, I think a lot of things are easy to say, including talking about the past and the future. You'll notice I didn't interrupt Avi as he did that and discussed hypotheticals of Hamas threatening Israel. To answer your question, Melinda, I do not think it's enough to say that. Let's be clear about what Netanyahu promised. He said, even if there is a hostage deal, presumably, even if all the hostages are released, he will continue the war. He will continue the annihilation, the erasure of Gaza. I want to be very clear for your audience. This week at a hospital, one of the last functioning surgical hospitals in the south of Gaza, Israel carried out repeated airstrikes that killed at least 28 people and wounded more than 70. And the hospital, of course,
what was located in that hospital?
Avi, I'm getting
Was
to
it
that.
just an innocent hospital? No, I think it's important to, I agree.
Can you
the audience
not
should know.
interrupt me?
You're
You have the
100% right. What was in that hospital?
to not
Was there
interrupt
perhaps a bunker underneath that hospital, as has been revealed?
Melinda, can you please interject and let me finish my point?
Well, I mean, in all honesty, Israel does say that it was attempting to take the life of the de facto leader in...
Okay, and how did they justify it? They've said this millions of times before, and it's been debunked and discredited. Avi, for the love of God, why are you interrupting me? You are making yourself look like you cannot handle basic...
Avi, it is, though, a war crime to be attacking hospitals, though. Does Israel accept that?
Can I make my point?
It is a war crime to operate militarily from within hospitals, which is what Hamas does, transforming them into legitimate military targets. That is the war crime.
You are lying. The justification that Israel provided was a video that was superimposed.
Be very careful before accusing someone of lying, because
Avi, you accused me on Twitter of being a psycho. So I don't know why you're telling me to be careful of accusing you of being a liar. Can I explain? Melinda.
Okay, gents. I'm going to move on to...
held in Israel in Palestinian hospitals that they have seen.
All right, Avi, I'm going to let Ahmed finish his answer.
I did not interrupt your...
Avi, hold fire just there. Ahmed, I want you to finish the question we had to you with regards to... well, now I've lost my place too, fellas.
Melinda,
the ceasefire.
He's claiming, no, Melinda, he's claiming that there was some command center under yet another hospital. The IDF released a video that superimposed...
I am not claiming that.
Avi, just let Ahmed finish. Just let Ahmed finish so that we can move on.
Avi, are you 5 years old? Can I make...
Ahmed, continue.
Calm down, Ahmed.
By releasing a video that's...
I know you know how to make great TV. Calm down.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. I can't be part of this.
Ahmed, just wait. Stay with us. We're going to move on to our next topic. But Avi, if you can just... we do like a nice robate debate here on Counterpoints, but let's just make sure that each of our panellists have a chance to make their point before we jump in too vigorously. I'm going to move us on.
I haven't made one point.
I'm going to move us on to our next topic area. President Trump's snub of Israel during this regional tour is being held up by some as evidence of a friendship in trouble. There have been reports even suggesting that the US could recognise a Palestinian state under certain conditions. France and the UK are already openly in discussions on how to proceed down that path. Ahmed, do you think US recognition of Palestine would be a positive step to ending the war, and do you think realistically it would ever happen?
No, I do not. And the reason I think that is because without accountability, there will not be peace in Israel or in Palestine. And that is not my opinion. That is what history has taught us decade after decade after century after century. If I can make the point that Avi interrupted earlier, the IDF released a video to justify their third attack on a hospital in 2 days that superimposed a diagram of an underground infrastructure onto an image of the hospital, only it wasn't even the same hospital that was in question. That is not intelligence, that is not justification, Avi, that is propaganda. And if I may, while we sit here debating Israel's intentions, today, or yesterday I should say, a journalist who's been documenting Gaza's struggle for liberation since 2009 was bombed inside the burn unit of yet another hospital. And I just want to point out for the audience, if I may, Avi, I know you've worked for the IDF as a foreign media liaison. You're a former spokesman for the Israeli Occupation Army and a former employee of the US-Israeli lobby, AIPAC. You also wrote on X that every single Palestinian and Israeli death is a result of Hamas and Hamas alone. And yes, it's really that simple.
100%.
But what I'd like to point out, Melinda, in answer to what Avi was asking me earlier, Netanyahu is wanted by the ICC for war crimes and for starving a civilian population. And Avi, let's not forget, you once tweeted at me, "Hey, psycho," demanding that I delete my ex account. I'm not a psycho, Avi, but you know what is psychotic to me? Trying to justify
it's interesting,
the
Ahmed, it's interesting that you point that out.
the starvation of children, the slaughter of journalists, the execution of 15.
Just let Ahmed finish that point and we'll come to you, Avi.
I'll be done in 20
Just let Ahmed
seconds.
finish that point, Avi, and then we're going to come to you.
Is not terribly surprising.
You know what else I think is psychotic?
You and
Israel
Hamas
can
have the same funding source. You were employed by the Qatari government. Is that not correct? You work
That is
Al
correct.
Jazeera,
Can I finish my point? I'm no longer employed by neither the Qatari government, the Saudi government, or the Israeli government.
All right.
Finish my point,
the funder of Hamas.
Avi, I want to ask you then. I want to ask you that same.
Melinda, he didn't let me finish the point. Again, why am I here? What's the purpose?
I'm sorry. No,
Ahmed, stay with us. Avi, if we can just let Ahmed finish his point, and then I'm going to come to you.
Israel, Avi, you are incessant and insufferable. Israel can assassinate a journalist.
I'm so sorry you feel that way.
A hospital, and not only admit it, but justify it by claiming that the journalist was engaging in journalistic activities. That's not self-defense. That's what I would describe as psycho. And when we say so, when we point to
the individual, hold on a second.
as I do every day, we're smeared as anti-Semites.
Okay, Avi, I would like you to respond to the question I put to Ahmed about the possibility of US recognizing a Palestinian state. Do you think that is at all possible?
So I'd like to just first respond to Ahmed's point about the so-called journalist. That journalist was embedded with Hamas on October the 7th, documenting Hamas's atrocities for propaganda purposes. He took a joyful selfie with Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, to claim that he is an innocent journalist is absolutely preposterous and does.
What about the other 215 journalists that have been killed?
To actual journalists who put their lives on the line in order to.
What about the other 215 journalists that Israel has killed?
He was a propagandist in service of Hamas, and let's be very clear about that. Now, I'm sorry, Melinda, in answer to your question, no, I do not think that we are likely to see the recognition of a Palestinian state by President Trump. Those reports have been flatly denied by the Trump administration. That is the sort of thing that can and should only happen in the context of an agreement between Israel and Palestinian leadership. I'm very hopeful that that happens sooner rather than later. I would like Palestinians to have self-determination as Jews do. And the only viable solution is a two-state solution agreed upon between both parties. At that point, I would welcome the recognition of a Palestinian state by this administration or any other.
What about the idea of whether or not you subscribe to it, the reports that the US is losing patience with Israel if it pivots its attention and its affections elsewhere in the region? Do you think Israel stands to lose out, and who else would stand to benefit, Avi? Do you think it's likely that the US will pivot away from Israel and focus its attention elsewhere, perhaps in the Gulf?
Well, I think different administrations have different foreign policy priorities. And it's certainly possible that this administration will not view the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a top priority, and in fact views the continuation of the war as an unneeded distraction from whatever it's trying to pursue. So that is certainly possible. If that were to happen, I'm certainly hopeful that this relationship would maintain its special status in both countries, as it has been, again, the case for 77 years now. But certainly, if there were to be any diminution of the U.S. presence or U.S. involvement in this region, I think it's fairly clear who the beneficiaries of that would be, certain malign actors, including Iran and its various proxies. I don't think we're likely to see that. I'm hopeful we're not going to see that. And I guess the coming weeks we'll see exactly what happens.
Ahmed, what do you think? If the US is pivoting away from Israel, who else could benefit?
Well, I think we shouldn't get swept up in the headlines. I mean, the fact that the US is talking to Hamas isn't a sign of peace. It's to me a sign of pragmatism. Washington knows, like Trump knows, that Hamas is not just a political reality in Gaza. It's much bigger than that. No deal happens without them. Recognition doesn't mean endorsement, Melinda. It means realism. And I think we need to be real for a minute. What country thinks that it can bomb a people, cage them behind barbed wire, and then pretend that they have no political voice? I mean, if these talks lead to open borders, a ceasefire, and end to mass starvation, then yes, it's a good thing. But under Trump, any deal will be shaped to serve American and Israeli interests first. So I agree with Avi on that fact. And I just want to mention, justice is needed in this case. Without justice, without accountability, as I've said, history teaches us there will be no peace. And Israel knows this, Avi knows this. There are 57 Palestinian children who have already starved to death, Melinda. Children, according to the WHO. 71,000 more expected to fall into acute malnutrition. And yeah, world leaders are beginning to speak here and there. Macron, who Netanyahu called shameful and said that he's standing on the side of Hamas simply because he is, like me, condemning Israel's mass killings and mass murder of journalists, doctors, nurses, teachers, children every day, which is being documented. But even the Financial Times, The Economist, The Guardian, The Independent, we're starting to see editorials that are finally naming this what it is, what the ICJ found it to be plausibly many, many, many months ago, which is genocide. I mean, we heard the Spanish prime minister saying, we don't sell arms to, or we don't trade, we don't sell arms to a genocidal state just yesterday. The only way forward, Melinda, is pressure, real pressure, arms embargoes, diplomatic isolation, ICC indictments. And it's not just enough to have the indictments, as we've seen, we actually need to enforce them. That means that the governments that have been shielding Israel must decide, are they going to choose the rule of law, international law, or are they going to continue to shield Israel and grant it impunity? I mean, even though I think the future isn't written, to me, I know, as anybody who is a critical thinker knows and who is a student of history, that there will nor be peace, nor will there be justice, nor will there be freedom until there is accountability for not just the crimes of genocide and ethnic cleansing, but the illegal occupation, the illegal annexation of more land and settlements, the illegal collective punishment and siege on Gaza for 77 days, starving millions of people. How do you justify that, Avi?
Avi, I'll let you respond and then we'll move on.
I don't justify anything. I'm not here on behalf of the Israeli government, even though I, unlike you, am independent. I, unlike you, have never been employed by the government of Qatar. I'm here on behalf of myself. And
You've been employed by the government that's committing genocide, though.
I'm not here as a representative of any particular government. And
Me neither. I don't work for Qatar. I'm an independent journalist. What's your point, Avi? Are you defending the genocide or are you not?
I wholeheartedly believe
is starvation a weapon of war that is legal under international law?
May I speak now? May I speak? That the humanitarian
I'm just giving you a little taste of your own intestines.
Ahmed, let Avi finish because we're almost running out of time. We still want to hit our last
Sure,
topic.
I'll take the high road.
I firmly believe that the humanitarian needs of Palestinian civilians in Gaza must be addressed. I think that that is an urgent need. I'm hopeful that that is something that can come forward in a way that circumvents Hamas, prevents Hamas from seizing that aid as it has done up until this point in order to feed its own people.
And right, so you're not sending aid because you're worried Hamas is going to steal the aid, so you starve and hold an entire population hostage.
I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful that a mechanism can be developed that enables the aid to get directly to Palestinian civilians, not to Hamas. And I'm also hopeful that this war can come to a swift end with the release of the hostages and Hamas laying down its weapons and giving up its iron grip on the people of Gaza. I'm very hopeful that happens in the very near future.
Okay, you're pointing to what is going to happen next there, Avi. So let me transition on to our third segment. The president's regional tour, we're talking US president here, certainly has more of an economic focus. But the deals and decisions that are being made during this visit are certainly going to have a direct impact on the situation in Gaza, and not least because it could galvanise or change the administration's push to end the war. So let me ask you, first of all, Avi, Netanyahu has vowed to push ahead with his expanded offensive. We were just speaking a little earlier in our program to the former head of Shin Bet, Ami Ayalon. He says that with all his military and security experience, Israel's stated aims have already been achieved and that this expanded operation isn't needed. What do you think Israel's goal is now if it's already achieved the destruction, it says, of Hamas? Why is it expanding this war instead of returning directly to the negotiating table?
Well, that's probably a question you should ask an Israeli government representative, which I am not. But I would say that there has been a certain indication, again, in the past, that military pressure has helped push Hamas to the negotiating table and has urged Hamas to perhaps be more flexible in its demands. That is something that previous examples have shown. I think that there is something perhaps to that here as well. But I agree. I think that there is significant concern in Israel about the expansion of the war. What does this mean in the long term? What are the actual goals that can be achieved at this point? And at the end of the day, I think we're all talking about pretty much the same thing. We're talking about the return of hostages. We're talking about an end to this war and the establishment of some kind of ceasefire, the entry of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip, and the establishment of some kind of governance structure in Gaza that prevents Hamas from taking hold again and threatening both the people of Israel and the people of Gaza. That ultimately needs to be the end game here. And I think figuring out how we get there, what the path forward is, that is what we need to be focusing on right now. I certainly hope that that's what decision makers are engaged in at this moment.
Ahmed, do you have any optimism that this is going to lead to better negotiations, not more disrupted negotiations?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that make me optimistic. I mean, I'm sure we saw the news that Reuters reported of Trump granting Saudi Arabia sort of permission or a path towards a peaceful nuclear program without demanding normalization with Israel in return, which was always sort of part of any deal that would have been discussed. And that is somewhat hopeful to me. Perhaps Israel will get left behind, as it should, much like apartheid South Africa was, for all the crimes it's been committing. And I just want to say, it's strange to me that, Avi's trying to assassinate my character by associating me with Qatar and Al Jazeera. I mean, here we are on Al Arabiya, which is funded by Saudi Arabia. I wonder if he has the same issues with that. But where I find hope... No,
I don't. I don't think that the Saudi government has played nearly the same nefarious role that the Qatari government has.
Let's stick to the topic that we're on.
I think we should. You brought it up. No, I think Qatar has been a nefarious actor over the past year and a half. And I think your association with Qatar
I brought it up just to say
concern.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, can I make my point about hope? Alvi, I want to share this with you sincerely, human to human. Over the past year or two, where I find hope is the young Jewish people who, despite being arrested, despite seeing that their religion's been hijacked, despite being disappeared and suspended across college campuses for standing up and saying, "Not in my name," I find it not only profound, but prophetic, Melinda. And it reminds me that solidarity is something that doesn't require sameness, doesn't require the same religion. These students are rejecting the binary that says, if you support Palestinian life, you're somehow against Jewish people or against Israeli people. These Jewish people across the world are embodying the truth that liberation is collective. And to me, that's the deepest form of anti-racist, anti-Zionist, and pro-human hope. That's a source of hope, because even when the systems that profit from pitting us against each other are working overtime to do that, they are Jewish people standing up to say what Israel is doing is obscene and must stop, and we should no longer be funding it or defending it.
Okay, last question to the both of you. Avi, I'll start with you. We've heard from President Trump's Middle East envoy that Hamas could play a political role in Gaza if it disarms. Is that a prospect that you think Israelis would accept?
No.
Why?
I think a leopard doesn't change its spots. I think Hamas has been dedicated in word and deed since the day of its establishment to the eradication of the state of Israel and the murder of all Jews. It says so extremely openly all the time. I think it's about time we started taking them at their word. They are very, very clear on what they want to do. They've said no matter what happens with this particular war, they will carry out more October 7th massacres time and time again until Israel is erased from the map. So no, I don't think an organization, a toxic, repulsive, anti-Semitic, genocidal organization like Hamas should have any role to play in a peaceful future in Gaza, I very much hope that Palestinian society is able to generate the kind of leadership, the brave leadership necessary to reach a peaceful settlement with the state of Israel, one that would see both nations living side by side in peace, harmony, and security. And that can only happen if Hamas is sidelined and pushed off the scene.
A response from you, Ahmed?
I would agree on one issue, which is, Hamas has been around for about 20 years. Israel has been around for 70. It is in the very early literature and policy papers of Zionism, everything that Avi mentioned and said Hamas wants and is threatening to do with Israel, that is what Zionism and the Jewish state...
That is a simple...
Avi, we're almost out of time, so just let Ahmed finish his response.
All I'll say is, you don't want to hear it from me, Avi. Listen to your own Israeli leaders and ministers.
You're lying. Avi, you're lying. It's not true. Zionism is about the establishment of a Jewish state
that I want to say.
in Palestine.
The Israeli military itself.
Avi, just one at a time. Avi, I'll come back to you to get a response, but please just let Ahmed finish his answer.
Thank you. The Israeli military itself, the IDF, said that over 80% of those killed, Palestinians being killed since March 18th, when the ceasefire ended, were civilians. That's the Israeli military's number. That's 4.5 civilians for every fighter, worse than Russia's ratio in Ukraine, worse than the US war on ISIS, worse even than Israel's own 2014 Gaza war. So, Avi, Gaza's medical workers are being bombed not by Hamas, by Israel, while they're trying to save lives. Gaza's journalists, the other 215, are being bombed and killed, and their family, 1,000 members of their families killed and targeted. And hospitals, as we said, which, as Melinda pointed out, are protected under international law, are being systematically targeted. In fact, as we've been sitting here, Al Shifa Hospital, a place filled with, displaced people, wounded patients, is now being under a direct threat of bombs.
Ahmed, let me ask this, though. You haven't answered my question, though. Should Hamas be allowed to play a political role in Gaza if it disarms?
Go for it.
If they disarm, they should be allowed to play a political role. But as I mentioned earlier,
Avi,
Melinda,
just let Ahmed finish.
I don't think that Hamas will disarm, because even if you disarm Hamas, just like Netanyahu helped funnel money from Qatar to Hamas, I mean, this is documented in multiple Israeli news organizations and goes back for years. It's not as though Hamas popped out of nowhere, right? So if it's not Hamas as we know them now, it will be another group that will resist Israel's occupation, apartheid, and collective punishment. That's just what history teaches us.
Okay, final response then. Avi, what do you make of what Ahmed has said? If it's not Hamas, is it going to be somebody else?
I think it's disappointing to hear Ahmed predict that we're going to live in a future of violence and terror. At the end of the day, what we should be aspiring to is not creating more terrorism, as Ahmed perhaps hopefully...
Then maybe Israel should end the occupation of occupied Palestine. Maybe Israel should stop sexually assaulting children.
Now you can let Avi finish, Ahmed.
No, he's spewing lies. Why would I let him finish?
I'm trying to say I want a Palestinian state. It's weird that you wouldn't want that.
You think that I'm
Ahmed, please let Avi finish, because we're almost out of time.
I believe in the establishment of a peaceful and democratic Palestinian state alongside the state of Israel. That is, I believe, the only equitable solution that is possible here. I believe the Palestinian people have the right to self-determination, just as the Jewish people do. And the only way that can come about is through peaceful reconciliation. The notion that an organization like
Hamas, without accountability for genocide,
engage in terrorism in its own means, could be a...
You can't have peace when you have an aggressor that is acting in violation of international law.
Deeply troubling.
You can't have peace, Avi, in a Palestinian state when you continue to take more Palestinian land.
Let Avi finish. Ahmed, let Avi finish, because we're out of time.
I have to say, it's really dispiriting to hear.
It's not dispiriting. It's offensive to you to defend a genocidal state. It is offensive.
We should be doing whatever we can.
It is perverse, and to use your word, it makes you sound like a...
Okay, gentlemen, that is all the time we have.
Advocate for peace and reconciliation.
It seems very angry and unable to
really sad, dear Ahmed, trying to fight for a future of violence and terror. It's really sad.
I don't want to fight for a future of violence. I want all
really
people
sad.
who live on the land of the Holy Land to have equal rights. And as you know, Avi, the Israeli government has been depriving any person who's Palestinian of having basic human rights for 77 years.
All right, Ahmed, just respond to Avi and then we'll wrap.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I don't know what to respond to him, Melinda. I appreciate you having me on this segment. He talks about a two-state solution when Israel continues to annex more land and build more illegal settlements because they have complete impunity because of the U.S. Look, I hope this ends.
I would think I would think that you would share my sense of urgency in reaching a solution as quickly as possible.
Jewish people in Israel, and Christians in Israel, and Muslims in Israel, and Druze in Israel will not be free until Israel gives everybody basic human rights and dignity.
All right, gentlemen. One thing we like here on Counterpoints is being able to bring together some very diverse and polar views, as this debate has just proven. Even though you both stand on completely opposite sides, we appreciate having both of you on to have your say and give our audience both sides of the story. Thank you to Avi Meir, the founder of Jerusalem Journal and the former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, and Ahmed Eldon, host of the newly launched Out Loud podcast and a journalist who writes on Substack. Thanks for your time. And thanks to you at home for tuning in to that very robust Counterpoints. I'm Melinda Nusafora. You can catch all our episodes on the Al Arabiya English YouTube channel and follow us on X and TikTok. I'll see you next time.